So what's going on? Last week on this channel, Marco, we talked about the NHL draft order, and big thanks again to the prospect Don. That was a lot of fun, and thank you so much for watching that with the passion that you guys did. The comments and the views off the charts. But I want to talk about and elaborate with more specifics as it relates to the reality of the Montreal Canadiens moving up the draft board. Obviously, they pick 16 and 17. Pick 16 comes from the Calgary Flames, right? But what about the latest out of Chicago, who are scheduled to pick number 3 overall? Is that pick really in play? What about further speculation as it relates to 3 teams scheduled to draft inside the top 10? Seattle, Buffalo, and Anaheim, 8, 9, and 10, respectively. So, Marco, let's start at pick number 3, Chicago. Is it truly in play? And how, in what world exists where Chicago moves that pick? Who grabs it? And what's the reasoning behind it as far as you're concerned today?
I think Chicago only moves that pick for like a Jason Robertson type of guy.
Yeah.
Like you need a star to take away a pick like that. You need a Dobson level, and I'm not saying that they're going to target either of these players, especially Dobson. I think they've spent enough capital on building up their right shot defense. So I don't think Dobson's in the cards. But if you look at teams, like I wonder about Carolina, for example.
Yeah, sure.
They have some forward, like you think about Svechnikov. Could they be willing to move on from him? And is that a kind of player with his size and his skill and his speed that could be a different kind of element for them to build out their top 6 and be competitive next year? They have the cap space. They just took on Burakovsky's contract because they clearly want to bring in an element, more of an element of scoring. Could it be a player that would make sense? They're also a team that could take on all of Jason Robertson's contract as well. Mm-hmm. So those are the kinds of players. I don't see a package of picks making this happen. Like if Canadiens fans think like the 2 first-round picks, Kirby Dach, and a bunch of seconds are going to get this. No. And I think there's one player that gets it done on the Montreal Canadiens, and that's it. His name is Ivan Demidov. So
not Uri. You don't even Uri Slafkovsky's name's being tossed around there again. I saw on the French. Was it BPM Sports? One of their pundits was talking about how, I think it was for Crosby, and I don't want to drag this in there, but the point of me bringing it up is, I mean, there are some in the market, not all, but some that are making the point, hot take or not, that like, oh, maybe Uri Slafkovsky could be sacrificed to the hockey gods in order to bring someone in more established. You know what I mean? I'm against it, by the way, but it's out there, Marco.
Yeah, it's out there from fans. It's out there from fans
hot
with a
take
platform.
Artists. Sure.
Yeah, but not from Canadiens management.
Right.
No, you don't give him an 8-year contract.
Right.
And trade him before it even kicks in. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. It's their first pick when they took over. Yuri Slafkovsky's not on the block. It would take a ridiculous trade, in my honest opinion, to get a Uri Slafkovsky.
Yeah, and not 2 years of rental of Sidney Crosby. No disrespect to 87, but I'm not making that deal.
I will say this until I'm blue in the face. And I swear to God, the more we get into this, the more I'm going to start dropping F-bombs at this point.
Yeah, I don't even want to talk about it personally.
Sidney Crosby will pick his spot if and when that happens, and it will not cost anywhere near Uri Slafkovsky.
Correct. But you and I talked last week about Caleb Desnoyers. When I saw the news of Chicago, maybe moving the 3rd pick, I'm trying to get away from the Crosby thing for a second. Like, when I saw pick number 3, I'm like, here we go. Marco and I talked about this. If they want Caleb Desnoyers, if pick number 3 is on the board, that's how you get it done.
Yeah, I know. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, this pick was offered to the Canadiens for the right to draft Demidov.
Right.
And Chicago knew that they were going to be a bottom 3 team next year, and basically the whole hockey world knew, and they wouldn't do it. Right. So if you're not going to trade a caliber of player, and Caulfield's not going to do it. They're already small enough. Slafkovsky's not going to do it. Still improving. Nick Suzuki, I could see them considering it, but why? You're taking a step forward to take 2 steps back at that point. So you have, nothing that you could offer them right now. Even Lane Hudson, like, I just don't see why they would necessarily do that. It makes no
That's bad
sense. So
business.
you're in
Yeah.
pure fantasy land here. So they're looking for an established piece, an elite piece, right? And I think that's what they would want in that case. I'm 99.999 convinced they're picking. So let's just toss Chicago to the side. I think teams that are more interesting in terms of what they're going to do are Utah,
Yeah.
who are looking for the same kind of deal, by the way.
They're at
Or
number 4.
yeah,
Yeah.
they could either trade out, or I could see them trading down because of how much they really like Brady Martin.
Okay.
Right. So it could make sense at that point where, like, for example, they trade down to 7 with Boston. Boston
Yeah.
trades up and gets that bigger center, and they're able to recoup an asset or a player in that process. I could see that happening. But the real fun to me in this draft starts from pick 6 to 10. I think that's where
Ooh.
you may actually see, for the first time in almost forever, a
Yeah.
top 10 pick be moved at the draft.
Wow.
And I'm
So
not like in 2022 where the Senators traded a day before the draft and got the 7th overall pick. I mean, like, on the draft floor during the
yeah.
draft.
Yeah. So pick 6 through 10, right? Philadelphia, Boston, Seattle, Buffalo, and Anaheim.
Mhm.
Montreal 16 and 17. So if the Canadiens brass is meeting and talking about and strategizing how to move up the board, how many teams are they fighting with if
Mhm.
they want to get inside the top 10 and get out from, 16 or 17 and try to get somewhere between 6 and 10? Who are they fighting with?
The Pittsburgh Penguins, first and foremost. Like, that's just such an automatic.
Yeah.
It all depends on what the Rangers eventually decide to do. They have 48 hours. So by Wednesday night, they have to determine whether or not they're keeping their first round pick or giving their 2026 first round pick to the Pittsburgh Penguins. That will determine what Pittsburgh does, in my
Okay.
honest opinion. But Pittsburgh really likes players in that 7 to 10 range. There's a couple of them. So that's a team. You look at another team like the Columbus Blue Jackets. I don't think they're in the business of trading up. I think they're in the business of trading out of the first round. So that may make things simpler. The thing with Pittsburgh versus Montreal, Pittsburgh has the 11th overall pick. So to trade up would require a second and something.
Okay.
The Canadiens have 2 first-round picks in this draft. So it all depends on the team that they're trading with. But there is more value for a team getting, because right now Pittsburgh only has a very late second, or they would have to trade a 2026 second. So it doesn't really make sense. They have like Washington second, which is very late. So you'd be looking at 11 plus 58, I believe, or 59
Mm-hmm.
to try and move up, which I don't think is as sexy an offer as 16, 17.
Right.
And you could even add Pittsburgh's second round pick, which the Canadiens acquired in the Jeff Petrie trade, at 41 to sweeten the pot if you must. But it is a more viable transaction, in my opinion. The Detroit Red Wings are another team I wonder about. They really like a couple of forwards in the draft. I think they have their eye on a guy like Justin Carbonneau. So I don't know necessarily if they feel they need to move up because they have them in that same tier. So again, if the Rangers keep their 2025 pick, I don't see them trading up. So really, the two teams that I could see the most aggressive in terms of doing that are the Montreal Canadiens and the Pittsburgh Penguins in terms of trading up. But the issue now becomes, we've talked about players in terms of teams in terms of where the draft is. Then there's who could trade in. And I think that's the difference, right? We're seeing a lot of big name players be put on the block, right? And a lot of those teams are looking for players coming back. But at a certain point in time, you realize the market just isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to make moves now. So that's when compromises internally are made and they end up trading them for higher futures. And I think that's where you may see more competition come from Montreal. From what I've heard, you look at a team like Anaheim, for example. Anaheim always on the lookout for physical right shot defensemen to play on their top pair. They don't have one, and they don't project to have one at this point. So definitely something that they're looking at, and also improving the depth in terms of their scoring for right shots. They have a lot of left shots. Trevor Zegras, Carlson, McTavish. They want to diversify. That's why they picked Beckett Seneca at third overall last year. So you could see them try to trade it for current assets. So I don't necessarily know if they make much sense for the Montreal Canadiens. The Buffalo Sabres, probably a team that's going to be getting a lot of futures. So I don't know if they would be willing to trade down for futures. The team, and I've been saying this since the beginning, the team that I think could be very dangerous in this regard, very much so, the Seattle Kraken. I
Really?
think Seattle Kraken.
Do they even have a clear direction? Like sometimes I wonder, but
Well,
how are they building the team?
They traded for Marchment and then moved out Burakovsky, right? So that was done because they just had the reason why I like Seattle is because they have a good team, but they're not elite at any position.
Right.
They don't have a star at any position.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They got good young players that project to be top 6 players, and they got a lot of them. I mean, they're cornering the market on centers right now. I think they got 9, right? So they're good and they could surprise, but they are the definition of, when you look at a team, they're the definition of mid in every possible form. Everything looks solid, but nothing looks great.
Yeah, Jared McCann, Chandler Stevenson, these are fine players, right? But
if those are your top 6 centers,
right,
what are you doing? And the thing is that you bring in these guys while you have guys like Benier and Wright coming in, right? But you're hurting them. You're hurting your team because here you are drafting 9th, 8th, 7th, 20th, when in reality you have these players you should be drafting top 5. And then signing the free agents. But they seem to be doing this hybrid model ever since the expansion draft. And it's they didn't pick a direction like the Vegas Golden Knights did. The Vegas Golden Knights were balls to the wall, pedal to the metal, through prospects, and they just traded for everybody. Yeah. So, and Seattle's kind of in the middle. So I could see them being like, you know what? We need to clear in depth. We need to bring in more youth. We need to take a run, at this next draft class and kind of retool on the fly. I could see it, but they got too much money tied up. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a third team becomes involved in this process.
Well, let me ask you quickly before we move on. What about this team when we look at the NHL draft board and they're scheduled to pick one spot ahead of the Canadiens, and they're very much in the rumor mill? Thatcher Demko's name, Brock Besser's name involved. The Vancouver Canucks at 15. A quick reaction on, is this a team that maybe could leapfrog the Canadiens and get inside that top 10 when we talk about competing with Montreal to move up the board?
No.
Are they a sleeper team?
That pick, bye-bye for immediate help.
For immediate. Oh, they're that desperate. Yeah, I mean, the bleep has hit the fan in Vancouver in a major way.
Everything they can to convince Quinn Hughes to stay.
Yes.
In my honest opinion, they could pull the moon closer to the planet Earth and it still wouldn't convince Quinn Hughes to stay.
What a disaster. What a disaster.
And to publicly put out there,
Jimmy Rutherford.
Unfortunately, you've shot yourself in the foot in terms of leverage. Everyone sees you coming out. Yeah. So they offered their first round pick and a prospect for Marco Rossi, and the Wild said no. They're going to return. I'm telling you right now, they're going to circle back, and we'll see what happens. But I've been told that pick is as good as gone, and the trade could already have been agreed upon. The only problem is the Abbotsford Canucks currently play in the AHL playoffs, and there could be a player on their roster that is holding up his deal, right? So that's something to think about when you go through that thought logic. But I don't think the Vancouver Canucks are going to be trading up. In fact, they're going to be trading out. I think they're in the F these picks era. And so already, they've gone out and traded a couple of their firsts in the past, famously that 9th overall pick in 2021 that ended up really costing them.
What was that one?
The Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade.
Oh.
Yep. And the player that now Utah Mammoth, but then Arizona Coyotes selected with that pick, Dylan Guenther, is quite the player. So,
yikes!
Yeah,
yikes!
So Vancouver Canucks fans are very, very, very used to trading
on edge. Maybe on edge, eh?
And so they're not. They would prefer a rebuild. They would prefer
Yeah.
completely wiping the slate clean and going through a rebuild and getting as much as they can for Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson. But it just does not seem the direction that Patrick Allvin wants to go. So really, when it comes to immediate trade ups, you look at the Calgary Flames, also 2 first-round picks, not looking to trade up, looking to trade out, looking to get some immediate assets to help. There are too many teams that are looking for immediate assets to help that a team that's looking to trade up right now, if you have the assets to do so, are few and far between. And that's why I've heard some noise in that regard, is that teams in the top 10 are open to trading down.
Fun.
And so that creates an element of surprise. And so when you don't hear the Canadiens linked to certain players, one thing to keep in mind, and I will say this, and I'm not going to spread a rumor, and I hope people don't use this to create an article or whatnot, but the Montreal Canadiens spent most of last season thinking they were going to draft somewhere between 7 and 13. So they spent most of the scouting year looking at players in that range. The Radim Murtkas, the Roger McQueens, the Carter Bears at the time prior to his injury, the Porter Martone that could potentially slide to 7 or 8. Like those were the guys that they were looking at, the Caleb Dinwiddie's. So if they feel like they can grab one and continue to add elite pieces as opposed to nice complementary pieces, they have enough complementary pieces. They need top 6 talent. And I think that's the key. And when you look at the players that could be available in the range of 16 and 17, there's no surefire top 6 player.
Right.
So what would you value more? 2 shots at the can of potentially getting a top 6 player, or 1 shot at a can of guaranteed top 6 player, potential top line or top pair player? Everyone that watches the Montreal Canadiens right now is going to go option 2. And you best believe that if you're the Montreal Canadiens, they're probably thinking the same thing.
You use the word guarantee. It's hard. I think it's hard for most people mentally to get over that. It's like,
I think it's
I'll
a
take the risk,
guarantee.
I'll take the gamble. If you're guaranteeing something to me.
But then why would a team trade down from that?
Yeah.
And the reasoning is to build out their prospect pool, to get more depth, because they feel like they know some hidden gems in this draft that some others don't. And that's the beauty of a draft that's considered weak.
Exactly.
Is that some teams will think they found diamonds in the roughs that others don't.
Yeah, and then you get paranoid. I love it.
So that's where you're going to see more conversations in the next coming days about teams trading up or trading into the top 10.
Don't forget, we have a special live show for you on Friday. This upcoming Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, Marco D'Amico will be in LA, Los Angeles, California, to cover the NHL draft. And we're going to have a special Friday live show. We're going to call it a 5 cassette, but we're not going to do 2 hours. We're not going to keep you for 2 hours on a Friday. So bookmark that right here on youtube.com, live Friday from the draft. 50% of us will be there, and that's good enough for me. Marco's the man in charge. That's Marco D'Amico. Follow him at MN D'Amico with RG Media.